Good afternoon and welcome everyone to another episode of Community Relations Corner. Today, January 27th, is designated as International Holocaust Remembrance Day by the United Nations, and it marks the day that the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp was liberated in 1945. On this annual day of commemoration, the UN urges every member state to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and the millions of other victims of Nazism, and to develop educational programs to help prevent future genocides. Today's program will be JCRC New York's contribution to this great effort, and we thank the Free Synagogue of Flushing for its sponsorship. I'm Michael Miller, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, JCRC-NY. New York City, Westchester, and Long Island are home to more than half of the Holocaust survivor population in the United States. As such, we have a unique responsibility to care for our survivor population and ensure that their stories are told. With that in mind, today, we are very fortunate to be joined by Leah and Jehuda Evron, survivors of the Holocaust, who will share their stories with us. We're also joined by Gideon Taylor, who serves as president of the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, chair of operations at World Jewish Restitution Organization, WJRO, and co-chairs JCRC-NY's own Commission on Israel and International Affairs. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us on this very significant day. I'd like to start by posing some questions to Leah and Jehuda. You both have lived through a lot of trauma in your lives. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected you and your extended family?
Oh, well, as everybody else, at the very beginning, we were sitting at home, not going out. Of course, we could talk with the family through the telephone, thank God. And we had once a week, usually a Sunday, we had a Zoom with the whole family. Slowly, you get used to it, sitting at home, not seeing everybody. But you understand that you have to do it because it's dangerous not to do it.
At the same time, I tell everybody, survivor that call me, I tell them that you cannot compare the Holocaust with the Corona, because we have computer, we have telephone, we have TV, we have food, and our life is secure. During the Holocaust, everybody was afraid of his life. Unfortunately, if we talk about the pandemic, unfortunately, many survivors are waiting for a vaccine. We got it through our rabbi. I have a rabbi that I study Tanya every Friday. And he gave me some appointment in Brooklyn, and we went to took the first vaccine. But unfortunately, I'm trying all my best, and Gideon knows I even addressed to Gideon and to Greg, trying to help, but unfortunately, we cannot get appointments for our members. And this is, we lost 4 or 5 members. They survived the Holocaust and they died from corona.
Yeah, I'm aware that several hundred Holocaust survivors have perished during this pandemic, and to the extent possible, we very much want to be of value and of assistance to the Holocaust survivor population in New York, and we've been working together with Gideon to see what we can do to try to ensure that the Holocaust survivor population, who are all older than 75 years old, are prioritized to receive the vaccine. So thank you very much for responding to that initial question. And now let's dive into the central message of today, of remembering what happened 75 years ago. We'd be very grateful if you could share your experiences before arriving here in America. Where did you grow up? What was life like in Poland and Romania before the Holocaust? Tell us about your childhood. Did you go to school? Please just begin to share with us what your experience was. And it's so important that our viewers and our listeners hear directly from Holocaust survivors as to what that trauma was, which is, as you said, incomparable to what it is happening today during the pandemic. Jehuda and Leah?
Okay. Before the war in Poland, I was very young. I was 4 years old when the war started. So I did not go to school. I was at home. We had a little garden and I was playing there, and that's it. Now, when the war started, what I remember that we left Poland and we crossed to Ukraine. But over there, it was not better than with the Germans, because they were coming into the place that the Jews were staying and just get rid of them. I can tell you even one story that I remember. I had a sister, she was 10 years older than me. So the two of us, and my mother was stayed. My father went to work. As we were there, a German guy comes in and he asks for water because he wants to shave. So my mother spoke perfectly German, and she asked him, do you want cold or hot water? So he goes, oh, I didn't know that the Jews are such nice people. So my mother gave him the hot water, and while he was doing his shaving, the Ukrainians come in shouting, where are the Jews? Where are the Jews? So the German guy goes and said, I don't want to see you here. Go away. There are no Jews here. So in a way, he saved our lives. But after a while, my father decided that this is not a place for us, and he took us back to Poland. Now, I have to tell you that after the war, when I asked my mother different question, she said, stop it, forget about it, and that's it. So I have,
Yep.
what?
Yep.
Yeah, I have, you know, the what? Yeah, places that I don't know how to connect them. But yes, we were in hiding, my mother and myself. My father and my sister went to the town of Ghetto. They were in Ghetto. And after I don't know how long, we had to leave the people that were hiding us. So we went, they brought us to the ghetto to my father. So we were there in the ghetto together. Now, my mother had to go to work, but she didn't want to leave me at home because when the people went to work and the children left behind, when they came back from work, there was no children anymore. The German came in and killed everybody. So my mother was taking me under her coat and smuggled me to the work. And over there, they were mending for the German army, all kind of things, sweaters and gloves and so. So my mother put me under the table and I was sitting there with her until they took us back to this. You know, there always were people that think there, then think about it, and they said that they will close the ghetto. So again, I don't know how my father or my mother, a guy took us to his home, my mother and me, my father and my sister took to the train. When we were hiding there, one morning he comes in, he said, your father is here. Wow. My father jumped from the train and he walked the whole night to come because he knew where we were. But he had to be taken to the hospital. He was culo with blood. Probably when he jumped, he fell on his face so the guy took him to the hospital and afterwards they took him to the ghetto. Now, I guess that he, together with my sister, were taken to Auschwitz.
We found at the museum in Washington, we found their names that they were killed in Auschwitz. Or my wife, she's crying. All her family, almost 60 people were killed, including her father and her sister. And she's the only survivor with her mother.
Where were you hidden, Leah? Where were you hidden after your father was taken to Auschwitz?
We stayed. Actually, my mother was taken to a family in Warsaw, and I stayed there with another family. And I understood later that as long as my father was able to give the money, they were keeping me. Once this was finished, they took me and brought me to where my mother was hiding, to the family there in Warsaw. And we stayed with this family until the uprising in Warsaw. When the uprising started, we had to leave, not only us, but the family, because it was a dangerous place. How do they call it? Whatever, doesn't matter. The building was very close to
the ghetto of Warsaw.
No, not to the ghetto.
To the uprising.
The uprising, yes, but it was dangerous there. Everything can blow up.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, so we had to leave. They left and we left. Walking on the street, not knowing where we're going, a guy comes and asks my mother, "Do you know how to cook?" She said, "Yes, come with us." So he took us to the guys that were, partisans. And she was, yes, they didn't know that we are not, that we are Jewish. And we stayed with them until the Russian came to Warsaw, but they didn't come in. So the German took the whole population of Warsaw on the train. And every stop where the train stopped, there were people staying outside, and each family was supposed to take a few people to them. So we were lucky because a very nice couple took us. Especially he wanted me because he had a little boy and he wanted somebody to play with. So we stayed there until the Russian came in. But meanwhile, they said she has to go to school. She has to go to school. My mother said, no, she's too young. Because I have three birth certificates because my mother was changing them all the time, that she was younger and younger, that I shouldn't have to go to school. So we stayed there until the Russian came in. When the Russian came in, we took the train to our place. Before the war, my father had a building with apartments and a factory in the back. So we took the train, and the train station in Poland was very close to our house. So we walked, and a woman stopped us in the middle of the day and said, "Look at this. Hitler promised us to get rid of the Jews, and here they are coming back." Nice. So anyway, we came to the house, was occupied by the Poles, they would let us in. But on the third floor, there was little apartment for the
maid,
for the what?
Servants,
for the girls that were helping in the house. So they went for the night. They went upstairs. So that's the place that allowed us to be there. And from there, my mother tried to find out the family. I had an aunt, my father's sister, she used in Switzerland before the war. And she was married there, she had children there. So my mother remembered one thing, the name and Lausanne. That's all. And she sent a letter to them with the name and Lausanne, and believe it or not, it was delivered. So they made sure that they brought us to them. We were with them. I went to school, and this is the end of the Holocaust.
So thank you very much for sharing that with us. We'll get back to you with a question or two in a moment, but I want to turn to Jehuda and ask him to share his story now with all of us.
Comparing to Poland, I think that Romania situation was excellent. We stayed in our apartment. The only thing, they took the business of my father, the businesses that he had, and I was not allowed to go to school. I had to wear yellow star, and of course we had to study in the synagogue upstairs where the women were praying. We had a class, and downstairs they were praying, and of course it was not the ideal situation, but comparing to what happened to Poland and Hungary, I can say that the situation was not bad, acceptable. In Jassy, where I lived, they had a pogrom, and 13,000 Jews were killed during the pogrom, including my two aunts, two uncles, and my cousin. But we survived. And
Jehuda, what year was this approximately? What year?
For 1940.
1940.
Yeah, I think that the main reason that Romania was a part of the of the ally of Germany.
Axis.
Germany didn't occupy as an occupier like in Poland and Hungary. They came like ally. And Romania had some kind of independence. I remember even when in Jassy, one day came a German and a Romanian officer and said, all the Jews have to come to they were blaming the Jews as communists. So they said, you do signals to the Soviet airplane where to bomb. So one of the Jews, I remember even his name, Wasserman, went to this officer, Romanian officer, and told him something. And he said, this is a good idea. the officer went through, there were 40 or 50 Jews, and started to take watches, rings, and put them here in his shirt. And he said, good long life to the Jews. If you have some problem, call me. He gave us the phone number, and I will take care of you. So this was the Romanian. With money, you could survive. In Poland, they took the money and they took the life.
Hmm. So what happened after that? After the pogrom in 1940, 13,000 people, Jews were, you said, were slaughtered. What happened to you subsequent to that? Did you remain in Romania?
Yeah, we moved to Bucharest from Iași, and I went to school. I finished my, I think my third grades, and then we went to Israel.
So what?
Our dream was always to come to Israel. I learned how to write and read Hebrew before I knew how to write and read Romanian.
So what year were you able to go to Israel?
1950.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened between 1940 and 1950? Can you fill us in on the status of your life in Bucharest, I assume, during that time?
Yeah, in Bucharest, as I said, my father was able to reopen his business. He had a factory and a few stores of, how do you say? Materials, yeah. And I went to school, and everything was more or less okay until the Soviet Union came to Romania. And at the beginning, the Germans blamed the Jews that they were communists. Now the communists came to Romania and they blamed the Jews that they are capitalists. So every time the Jew was guilty. So, and they took again, nationalized his factory and his stores. And then we went to Israel. We had enough.
So we heard from Leah about her family and that she and her mother were the only survivors. Can you tell us about your family, Jehuda?
My family survived, except two uncles and a cousin that were murdered in Iași. And I remember that my aunt, who lost her son and her husband, was suicidal. My father had to stay with her day and night to protect her from committing suicide. And as I said, comparing to what happened around us, Romania was more or less okay, except Iași, where 13,000 Jews were killed in one day. They were taken to train. Hermetic closed the train without food, without water, and taking them to a next station, took out the dead Jews, went back to Iași. All day they had the same track, and until they killed 13,000 Jews.
I
went to Romania to and we saw the memorial of the Jews that were killed.
I understand that both of you are very passionate about restitution. Can you tell us about the status of your property? Both your fathers had businesses, had offices. You had, we heard from Alea about her home. What is the status of the restitution of those properties? And the question is addressed to both of you.
Okay, so my husband will tell you because he takes care of it.
Okay, so Jehuda, can you please explain?
Regarding our properties in Romania, unfortunately, that it's difficulties, legal difficulties, because my father transferred the businesses on a friend, Romanian friend, not Jewish, and Nicolae Ruce, I remember his name, and had difficulties to recover. But my wife, factory and building in Poland, we are fighting for already 30 years, since Poland became a free country, quote, free country. And we are trying our best. Last week, we sent another check to our lawyer in Poland, $15,000. We just have expenses, but it's a question of principle. We don't think that they are entitled to inherit the property of her father that was killed. They nominated themselves as the heirs. I don't think it's right. We are fighting. Probably we spend more money than the value of the property.
Right.
But it's a question of principle. We don't give up.
Well,
and a few lawyers, and I created an organization called Holocaust Restitution Committee that had 3,000 members, all in the same situation. They had properties, homes in Poland, and they cannot recover. And Gideon was instrumental in this effort. He tried everything, WJRO and claims conference. And unfortunately, they refused. Comparing with Germany, for instance, that initiated that's all the Holocaust, they returned all the properties, including Eastern Germany, when they unified, and claims conference sold this property and helped the survivors who were in need.
Well, I want to turn it over to Gideon. With the role that you play at the World Jewish Restitution Organization that Jehuda referenced as WJRO, can you give us a sense of what the bigger picture is on this issue of restitution? Gideon?
So I think that, the first thing I just wanted to say is I think for any of us who are engaged in this work or involved as volunteers, as I am now, when you see someone like Jehuda and Leah and their friends and people like this, I think for any of us who just listens to that story, it's so inspiring that from the depths of everything that they went through comes through a optimism and a positivity and inspirational. When I think of all the tribulations we have in our own lives and the things that are challenging, then when there's people like Jehuda with us and Leah with their big smiles, and I think that says something for all of us. And to turn to the question of the restitution, and for those who are watching, I'm going to really acknowledge Michael's family connection, because his father was a heroic leader of the claims conference for many years. Took on this responsibility at a time before there was many negotiations with Germany in a difficult time, and was an inspirational and towering figure. So Michael certainly knows this from growing up in his house, the commitment to these issues. And I think for most people, like the way, as you just heard Yehuda describe it, this is not ultimately about money. So people often ask when we're in a discussion or a negotiation, and people say, so how much is it? How much do you want? How much does it cost? What's the value of it? Because we as a society, we translate things into financial terms. That's what we do. That's the way we find a medium. But it's imperfect, because for many people, and you just heard it from Yehuda and Leah, and I hear it time and time again, this is about much more about an emotional connection. Often a piece of property, a factory, a home, a business, a tailor shop, it's the last tangible connection that people had with a world that was their family, that was wrenched from them amidst the most savage destruction of our times, of the Holocaust. So the cause of restitution and the argument for it, I think ultimately is a moral one. And you know, even the name of the organization that deals with Germany, the claims conference, as Michael knows well, it has the most unwieldy name. It's called a Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. Now, that's a pretty long name. When you look back in the history, when they were coming up with a name, when they came together after the war, the organizations, they inserted the word material into the name of the organization, Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, because they wanted to make the point that this was only addressing and trying to deal with material issues, but the moral issues, the issues of principle, those would continue. And I think that's been the whole cause, both with Germany, which as a perpetrator country, and Austria, where there's been a lot of compensation and restitution paid. And the issues in Eastern Europe also are moral issues about properties. And then, of course, there was Western Europe, the Swiss banks and the insurance companies and so on. So it's been an effort that continues to this day. And I think that as long as there's any survivor alive and beyond, it's an issue of principle. And that's why I think people like Yehuda and Leah give those of us engaged in this the inspiration.
Yes, and it truly is inspiring to all of us who are not children of survivors or don't have survivors of the Holocaust as members of our family. They might not be blood relatives, but Yehuda, Leah, and all of those who endured such hardships become a member collectively of the Jewish family. I know we have members of the non-Jewish community as well on this webinar. I believe that you're part of their families as well, and are providing us with guidance and fortitude moving forward through the traumas that we're experiencing, which, as you said right at the outset, don't compare, as Leah certainly said, don't compare to the deprivation that you had to live through. So I want to move from restitution to education, to memory. What's been happening, it's not just a matter of having this webinar or utilizing this day or Yom HaShoah or Tisha B'Av as days to remember. We need to remember and learn the lessons of the Holocaust all year round. So Gideon, what is the state of Holocaust education, particularly among young people here in the United States?
So I think what we understood from Holocaust education maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago is very different from, I think, the way we need to look at it today and going forward. I mean, for us, Holocaust education is not just learning knowledge or facts, though those are very important. And we've seen a very disturbing trend of a lack of knowledge about the Holocaust, about basic knowledge. And in fact, a survey that the Claims Conference did just a few months ago, as you may have seen here in the United States, but we've done similar surveys in other countries, showed that of young people, over half could not name one concentration camp, meaning they couldn't come up with the name Auschwitz. Now, for people, for a slightly older generation, Auschwitz symbolizes not just the Holocaust, it symbolizes man's inhumanity to man. The lessons of Auschwitz are universal ones that are important for us as Jews, but important for the wider community and for people participating today, for people in this wider community. And that lack of knowledge is deeply, deeply concerning. And I think that what we need to do is to redouble our efforts, because the Holocaust ultimately is the most important tool to combat racism, hatred, to make people understand what are the consequences of racism. So people can learn, oh, this is racist or that's hatred and hate speech. But what the Holocaust tells us is, where does that lead to? It leads to the stories you just heard from Jehuda and from Leah. And that's what I think future generations need to take from the Holocaust. That's what, for us, Holocaust education means. And, you know, today we're blessed that we can be joined by a Jehuda and a Leah. We have people who can tell their stories in their own voices. We need to think about a world down the road in years to come, and we need to make sure that the lessons can be learned by a younger generation that maybe won't hear Jehuda and Leah and people like them and survivors who went through the unimaginable. And I think that's a task for all of us. I think it's for the Jewish world, the non-Jewish world, it's for organizations, it's for government, it's for individuals, it's for all of us.
That's very important. Before I ask a question of Leah and Jehuda, if any of our viewers want a question to be posed, please just put it into the chat. We appreciate some of the very kind comments that have been put into the chat about this program. But if you have questions, don't hesitate over the course of the next few minutes that we're going to be together to do it immediately so we can ask the questions. And now I want to pose the question, as I did to Gideon. Why is it important for you, Jehuda and Leah and Jehuda, why is it important for you that we emphasize Holocaust education and Holocaust memory? Gideon just spoke to it, but let's also hear about why you believe that Holocaust education and Holocaust memorialization is so important as survivors of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. Leah, Jehuda?
Because unfortunately, we see that 70 years after the Holocaust, people already started to forget, and some people deny that even Holocaust ever happened. So I think that this is very important to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive, to talk to the new generation, and we had a program that we interviewed. We were interviewed by students at NYU, and
yeah, they were coming to us.
They were coming to our house, and like you said, Gideon said, they don't know anything about the Holocaust. Was a guy student from India. He said, I never heard the word Holocaust. So we spent some time with them. And I think it's very, very important to keep the Holocaust alive, memory alive, because we saw now in the Capitol, there were people wearing Auschwitz, and 6 million were not enough.
Right.
So this type of, unfortunately, we still have anti-Semites, people that think that we had a meeting, Zoom meeting with Zuckerberg, and many people on Facebook were denying the Holocaust.
Right.
We asked him to interview. And I remember a quote from one of the guys. He said, the Holocaust never happened, but we'll make sure that it happened today. So it's terrible.
Leah, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think also that we have to do anything possible that Holocaust won't, how do you say?
Won't happen again.
What happened again, of course, but it was not be forgotten, because I think we owe it for all the people that were killed during the war. We have to keep it, you know, how do you say? Alive.
Right. So
Grand Conference, it's helping a lot. They have a program that makes sure that young people get educated about the Holocaust, and in school and in university. I think that Gideon has a class in one of the universities in New York that teaches Holocaust, about Holocaust.
So thank you. One of the questions which is coming in is, do both of you, do you have children of your own? Do you have another generation? We didn't talk about your own family.
We have 3 boys and 5 grandchildren, and now one granddaughter in Israel.
Mazal tov.
Thank you.
First great-grandchild. And we wanted, last year we went 3 times to Israel. This year we trying to see him. And we can see him only through the picture that send us by email.
So how has your experiences impacted on your children and your grandchildren? How aware are your children and grandchildren of what you've shared together with us today, or maybe even more aware?
Yes.
We told them, they ask questions, especially my wife, about her experience in the ghetto in Poland. And we tell them all the time, even if they don't ask, we initiate discussion about the Holocaust. They know that we are involved, very much involved in Holocaust activities, Holocaust survivors activities, and they appreciate very much.
They like to come and see pictures that I have from before the war.
Right.
And after the war, whatever was left. Yeah. And
so, Leah, one of the questions which is coming on the chat is, what city in Poland were you from? We know where Jehuda came from in Romania. Before,
we lived in Żywiec.
Okay.
Yes.
And how important is it for you that there be the preservation of a Jewish heritage in Europe, especially in Poland and Romania? Again, Jewish heritage being recognized in Poland and Romania today. How important is that?
I think it's important.
It is.
I think.
We went a few times back to Poland, a few times Even we took our children and grandchildren, we hired a minibus and we took them to tour the Poland and to go to Auschwitz. And a picture of one of our granddaughters, she was writing all the time. So I said, Lee, what are you writing all the time when we were in Auschwitz? Because I want to bring my children to Auschwitz and show them exactly what happened.
Right.
That's very important. I was very impressed.
One of our viewers also mentioned that Steven Spielberg has a whole video project of interviews of Holocaust survivors. Have the two of you been interviewed either by that project or some other project so that your stories will remain for forever?
I think you were interviewed by Spielberg.
I think I was, yes.
Yeah.
I think I was.
Yeah, it's very important in perpetuity that the stories of the Holocaust survivor community are enshrined because the laws of nature, we're on this earth only for a limited period of time. We're blessed to have the two of you with us, and thank God you have children, grandchildren, and a great-grandchild. So I'm going to turn to each one of you to ask for a last word from each participant as a message to our many viewers regarding the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, about how important this day is. So we'll start with Jehuda and Leah and conclude with Gideon. So just a few short sentences on the importance of this day and what it means to you and what it should mean to all of us. Jehuda, do you want to start?
Yes. I think that I wish we had more than one day a year to memorize the Holocaust, because this is with us every day. We live the past, and like you said, Spielberg effort and Klein Conference effort and WJRO effort are all directed toward the memory of Holocaust to be kept. I saw in 60 Minutes, they have a project. I think they interview the Holocaust survivors for 6 days, and they ask all kinds of questions, and they have a program, a software that shows the survivors even after they die, telling their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Eva Kor, survivors, was interviewed, and she passed away, and they interviewed her 60 Minutes about the question about the Holocaust. And I think it's very, very important to keep the memory of the Holocaust, to make sure that doesn't happen again. I remember that I
understand, Jehuda, that you lead a group of survivors in Queens.
Yes.
And that hopefully you've stayed connected during the pandemic, and how important it is, even that within the survivor community, that there's a communication. And I believe that there also are holograms that reference the Holocaust, with another way of in continuing remembrance. And truth be told, that my sister works at the claims conference and has been feeding me information in this regard. So let me go back to my question, though, about the importance of this day. And I'd love to hear one more time from Leah before we conclude. The importance of the day, Leah.
Importance of this day.
Importance. First of all, as I said, to remember all the people that we lost. That's number one. Number two, to go into schools and teach the young people about it. It's very important.
Right. Thank you. And I'll turn it to Gideon.
We are always open for young people if they want to come in and
interview us. We
are open.
We are ready to tell them the story.
That's wonderful.
I remember that I got a picture from a grandparent looking at his number from Auschwitz, and his grandson asking, "This is the number that you have to remember?" So he answered, the grandparent answered, "This is a number that you have to remember, not me."
Very important message. Gideon, can you wrap up?
And I think two things. Number one, the Holocaust, this is a story, yes, about Jehuda and Leah and a Jewish story in many ways, but this is a story of universal relevance. This is important and learning and knowledge for our society, our broader society, our wider society here in New York. Second point, last point I want to make, New York, as you said at the beginning, Michael, half of the Holocaust survivors in the United States live in New York. New York became a home to Holocaust survivors, a welcoming home after terrible and tumultuous times. And I think New York has a special responsibility for the welcoming of survivors, for how we deal with survivors, and for education and messages of education and lessons of the Holocaust. And I think that's what this day, I think, speaks to.
Thank you so much. My thanks and the thanks of all of our viewers, to Leah, to Jehuda, to Gideon. Thank you so much for joining us on this very special edition of the Community Relations Corner. So meaningfully sharing your memories and shedding some light in the darkness of the Shoah. This has been so informative and inspirational to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So again, our heartfelt gratitude for taking time out of your days to share your stories together with us and give greater meaning to this very important day on the calendar. I'm Michael Miller, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on the Community Relations Corner. We're going to be interviewing a very dear friend of mine, Reverend Jacques de Graaf, who will be discussing the meaning of Black History Month in 2021. Again, my thanks to our amazing guests, to Leah and Jehuda Evron, to Gideon Taylor. My thanks to our production team at JCRC, to Noam Gilbert, to Rebecca Grossman, and to Jennifer Glick. My thanks to all of you for participating together with us on this most important and solemn day. Shalom to all. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.